multimedia project is over Down syndrome, created by Mackenzie Mazzeo and John Drury. Many people have heard of Down syndrome, but in case you haven't heard of it, let's start from the beginning. Each cell in the human body contains a nucleus. Inside that nucleus are chromosomes. Chromosomes are what contain our DNA. They are strands of DNA that is wound up tightly into rods to make the chromosomes. Our chromosomes hold everything that makes us who we are. Chromosomes hold all of our genetic material. Typical individuals are born with 23 pairs of chromosomes in each cell. Individuals born with Down syndrome are born with an extra chromosome, a chromosome number 21. Continuing with chromosome 21, humans are typically born with 46 chromosomes in every cell, and those are divided into pairs. One half of each pair of chromosomes comes from each parent. Chromosome 21 is the smallest human chromosome, representing only 1.5 to 2% of the total DNA in the cells. A little background about Down syndrome is in 1866, a physician named John Langdon Down released a scholarly article recognizing that Down syndrome was more than just a characteristic, it was a condition, and eventually became known as the father of Down syndrome. When Down syndrome was at the beginning stages of discovery, it was common practice to institutionalize the individual shortly after birth. Not receiving the medical attention they needed, most did not survive infancy, and if they did not make it past early adulthood. In 1959, a French physician named Jerome Lejeune figured out that Down syndrome was a chromosomal condition. Shortly after this discovery, researchers came up with chromosome studies so that physicians would be able to confirm the diagnosis. Living with Down syndrome today has changed dramatically over the past few decades. Individuals born with Down syndrome all have a different degree of cognitive delay, anywhere from mild to severe. Most individuals living with Down syndrome today fall upon mild to moderate. Most individuals born with Down syndrome are not institutionalized. They are raised at home with their family where they can receive the proper medical attention. And those who are, quote-unquote, institutionalized, today are more so put into a group home where they live with others with Down syndrome and receive all the medical attention needed as well as social interaction. Due to modern technology, the life expectancy of someone born with Down syndrome has significantly increased to anywhere between 60 and 80 years of age. Some may wonder, how common is Down syndrome? Well, according to the Center of Disease Control, 1 in every 700 babies born each year is born with Down syndrome. About 6,000 babies are born with Down syndrome in the U.S. each year. 1 in 1,000 babies born in developed countries are born with Down syndrome, while 1 in 650 babies born in developing countries are born with Down syndrome. 80% of babies born with Down syndrome are from mothers under the age of 35, even though having children after that age are at a higher risk. There are 3 types of Down syndrome: trisomy 21, mosaism, and translocation. Now let's talk about trisomy 21. Down syndrome is usually caused by an error in cell division. This results in an embryo with 3 copies of chromosome 21 instead of the usual 2. Before or at conception, a pair of the 21st chromosomes from the sperm or the eggs fails to separate. As the embryo develops, an extra chromosome is replicated in every cell of the body. This type of Down syndrome accounts for 95% of all cases. Mosaism is another form of Down syndrome. Mosaism Down syndrome is diagnosed when there is a mixture of 2 types of cells, some with the usual 46 chromosomes and some with 47. The cells with 47 chromosomes have an extra chromosome, 21. Mosaism is the least common form of Down syndrome and accounts for only about 1% of all cases. Individuals with mosaic Down syndrome may have fewer characteristics of Down syndrome than individuals with other types of Down syndrome. Now for the last form of Down syndrome, translocation. Translocation accounts for around 4% of cases of Down syndrome. The total number of chromosomes in the cells remains 46, but an additional full or partial copy of chromosome 21 attaches to another chromosome. It usually attaches to chromosome 14. The presence of the extra full or partial chromosome 21 causes the characteristics of Down syndrome in translocation. For this presentation, we are covering trisomy 21, but nevertheless, there are other forms, and it's good to know. How to test for Down syndrome. There are 2 types of tests that can be performed to determine if the baby in utero has Down syndrome. There's There's a screening test, which estimates the chances of the baby being born with Down syndrome with no definitive answer. Then there's the diagnostic test, which are nearly 100% accurate in diagnosing Down syndrome. Some parents-to-be may ask, why test for Down syndrome? Well, the answer is easy. Early detection of Down syndrome can make a huge difference in quality of life. Each child born with Down syndrome is unique, and treatment depends on the individual's needs. The earlier the detection, the earlier you can develop a plan and a team. Most children born with Down syndrome rely on a team of specialists that provide medical care and help develop as many skills as possible. How Down syndrome is diagnosed. There are two types of tests. Because neither of the tests give an absolute 100% definitive diagnosis in utero, once the child is born, there are other tests that will be performed for confirmation purposes. The doctor mainly bases their opinion on the newborn's appearance, but because some children can be born with the features of Down syndrome but not have it, the doctor will order a blood test that analyzes the chromosomes, and if there is an extra chromosome 21 in some or all the cells, the newborn has Down syndrome. Now it is time for the genetic causes. All three types of Down syndrome are genetic conditions. Only 1% of individuals born with Down syndrome have a hereditary component. Trisomy 21 and Mosaicism do not carry the hereditary component. Translocation does carry a hereditary component, leading to the 1% of individuals born with Down syndrome having a hereditary component. Despite the type of Down syndrome a person may have, each case is due to an extra chromosome 21. The case for the extra chromosome is still unknown. The age of a mother has been linked to a greater chance of producing a child with Down syndrome, but still 80% of children born with Down syndrome, the mothers are under the age of 35. So what does it mean to have Down syndrome? Children born with Down syndrome are at higher risk for about 75% being affected by hearing loss, 50 to 75% are affected by sleep apnea, 50 to 70% experience frequent ear infections, 60% develop eye diseases, and 50% experience eye problems, resulting in the need of glasses. 50% are born with a heart defect, 12% are born with intestinal blockage resulting in surgery, and 6% experience frequent hip dislocation. 4 to 18% are born with thyroid disease, 3% are born with anemia, and 10% are born with iron deficiency anemia. 1% develop leukemia at infancy or early childhood, and older adults with Down syndrome have a high risk of developing Alzheimer's. Individuals with Down syndrome most likely have decreased intellectual development, poor muscle tone, and reflexes at birth. Continuing with what it means to have Down syndrome. Children born with Down syndrome typically have these features. They inherit hair, skin, and eye color the same as typical people, but have flat faces, wide-spaced eyes, upward slanted eyes with abnormal skin folds in the crease of the eye, small and slightly low-set ears, a small short nose, short neck, a short pinky finger that curves inward, one crease in the palm of the hand instead of two, wide gap between the first and second toes, and thicker lips. They may also show fissured and slightly protruding tongues, shorter stature than their siblings, speckling on the iris, premature aging, and many dental abnormalities. And these are our citations for all the information that we gained.